Yeah, let's go ahead and do this thing.
Hi, buddy. I'm Matt.
And I'm Steve.
And this is Marvel Reread Club.
Okay, so Matt, how have you been the last couple of weeks?
I have been all right. I've been watching a lot of World Cup with my son and Braves games as well. So we've been all sports all the time. Unfortunately, we stayed up late watching a World Cup game last night, England, Mexico. And then we both slept in this morning and forgot he had soccer camp this morning, where presumably they all would have loved getting caught up and talking about the World Cup games. But oh well. So then, and it was too late by the time we remembered. So we're just going to have to take them tomorrow and throw ourselves on their mercy. So, oh well.
Oh no, that's yes. A shame. Yes.
Yes. How are you, Steve?
I'm doing fine. As you know, my birthday was a couple days ago, and
yes, happy birthday!
Thank you.
A real live nephew of your Uncle Sam, born on the 4th of July.
I've never heard that one before. Yeah, really. Some friends of mine have a big annual July 4th party on their property. And this is my second year going and spending my birthday there with them during their party. And that was a lot of fun. That's pretty much about it. And then Amy had the whole week off. So we've been doing some stuff in the downtime here, which is nice.
Yes. Okay. Well, that's very exciting.
So shall we go ahead and get into things here?
All right, let's go ahead and do the books of January 1969. We are starting 1969 after spending a long time, I think about a year, on 1968. We're going to get through 1969 a little quicker. There are no new annuals in 1969, and there are going to be fewer books as the months go by, as books begin to get canceled. So let's go ahead. Should we jump in with The Amazing Spider-Man 68, Crisis on Campus?
That was my plan, yes.
All right, who should do it?
Well, let's see. Either I do that, Thor and Hulk, or I do Daredevil and Uncanny X-Men. So which of those would you rather have? Would you rather have the three?
Yeah, I'd rather have the three, I think.
Okay, why don't you go ahead and do that?
All right, let's go and do Amazing Spider-Man number 68, Crisis on Campus. I think you did Spider-Man last, so I think this all lines up correctly. Because I remember when he was fighting Mysterio, constantly correcting you, going like, no, he doesn't think Mysterio's giant. He thinks Mysterio is regular size. So let's go and do this issue, Crisis on Campus. We have Spider-Man swinging at us in something that I think was later used as clip art for various other things. If you just cut out the rioting students behind him. Behind him, he has a bunch of rioting students. We can actually sort of make out their signs this time about low rent dorms, which is, I think, a really interesting topic for this issue. They are a mix of black and white, including some characters that we will actually recognize on the inside. And this issue begins a long storyline. So you have never read these issues, correct?
That is correct.
So this issue begins a long storyline called the Tablet storyline. I don't know if you read this issue and realized that this was going to be a going concern for quite some time, but it is. The whole tablet storyline makes no sense to me because you begin with the Kingpin is being shown what looks like a high quality photograph of a tablet with an inscription on it. And he's told no one can translate this, but anyone who can will have wealth and power and fame beyond their imagining.
Because that's how academia works.
Yes. You have people who translated tablets. We all know and love them. So then Kingpin finds this out and he's like, I must have this tablet. Get me this tablet. And I'm like going, dude, if it's just translating the inscription that's the problem, you've already got a high quality photo of the tablet. You already have all you need. You don't actually need the tablet. Now, if the tablet itself had some sort of magical powers, then I could understand. But again, Kingpin's not really into magic. But I could understand if there was some inherent quality to the tablet that you needed, then this whole storyline would make sense trying to get the tablet. But if it's just being able to read the tablet, then you have a high quality photo. That should be it. I don't know. Did this bother you?
The way I saw it was it's valuable just in and of itself as an object because it is unique in the world. And that the powers that be might pay a hefty sum in ransom basically to get the thing back.
Yeah.
But yeah, the whole thing about who can interpret this thing, it's completely immaterial of whether or not you actually have the object itself in your hands, I would think. But still, the object itself would be extremely valuable. And I think that it would be of more value than translating the thing in terms of monetary value.
But even then, like, kidnap a translator. Even if you get the tablet, Kingpin, you're not a great translator of ancient texts. It's not going to do you any good.
But he has the thing and other people want it.
True. Okay. So then he finds out how valuable this thing is, demands to have it, and then says it's under heavy guard. And what if Spider-Man? You can't even sneeze in that town without him crying out of the woodwork. And he gets so angry about Spider-Man, he demands that a bunch of goons be sent in so he can beat them up. And, Kingpin was John Romita's greatest addition to the Spider-Man mythos. He loves him. He keeps coming back as a character without ever being gone away for very long. And John Romita just loves the show Kingpin beating people up and bragging about how he's a lot stronger than he looks. And it is just lovely. And it is always wonderful. When they went with the Vincent D'Onofrio version of the character, which he has been the actor most associated with the character, we never really believed he could beat people up. That was the one advantage that Michael Clarke Duncan had playing the part. Michael Clarke Duncan was someone who looks like an overweight guy, but also it's really believable when it then turns out he can really beat the crap out of you. So he was sort of ideal casting for the part in a way that Vincent D'Onofrio is not. But Vincent D'Onofrio has also been great in the part.
Yes.
So then we cut to Spider-Man, who is swinging around and has to sneak into his apartment. The next day, he's sort of moping around campus. When finally he meets a character we've already met, he meets Randy Robertson. Robbie Robertson. Robbie Robertson is Peter's boss at the Daily Bugle, or second command boss at the Daily Bugle. But Robbie Robinson is also something called Joe Robinson, and here's his son, Randy Robinson. I get all these names very confused. But Randy Robertson is a new student at ESU. He's becoming friends with Pete. Pete says, I like your dad. I'm sure I'm going to like you too. But then instantly we find out that Randy is more into politics than Pete is. And he meets up with another activist named Josh, who I really like Josh's look. Josh has a sort of neat sort of college student look. And
although he looks older than a college student to me.
Well, I don't know. I believe that.
I think it's just the receding hairline makes him look like he's in his 40s. But I'm not saying that people at that age can't have hairlines that are that far back, either because they're receding or because that's just how they were born. But
also not saying that people that age can't be in college.
Well, this is true too. Yes. Oh. Yes.
So then they have an issue. And their issue, I would sort of prefer that this issue had had the courage of its convictions and just been like, we are protesting the Vietnam War. Where do you stand on that, Peter? But they don't. So instead, they've got a more sort of complicated issue where it's more sort of acceptable for Peter to be sort of split about. And that is that they want a new low rent dorm on campus instead of that campus being used to house alumni for some fancy thing that's going on. And that's believable. This is the sort of thing that colleges get very upset about, but people who maybe don't go to that college are like, why are you so upset about this? Why are you having riots and protests about this? Which is, I think, a lot of what was actually going on at the time, where, you would get these small issues that then, because of the climate at the time, would get blown up into bigger issues. And people outside were kind of like not understanding what was going on. And I think this is an interesting sort of thing. I think it would have been more courageous to have force Peter to take a side on Vietnam, but I think that this is more believable. So then we actually see let's call him Joe. We see Robbie Robertson, aka Joe Robertson, at the Daily Bugle. We see a picture of his wife and kids. So this is the first we've ever seen of his wife. We've had his son before, and his son is a major character in this issue.
And actually, his wife has the same hairline as Josh.
Yes.
Never mind. Go on.
Peter and Gwen visit Aunt May. Aunt May is sicker than she's letting on.
Although at one point they refer to Aunt May as Anna by accident. On page 8, Anna, who I believe is Anna Watson, answers the door and says, "Come in. This will be the best possible medicine for Anna." Yeah, just a weird typo.
Okay. Yes, you're right. The next day, Peter's on campus. He sees, student committee for a low rent dorm. They've all got placards. They've all got sandwich boards that they're using to protest, picket signs. And then Peter, is like, yeah, I'm not going to join you. I sort of agree with what you're saying, but not enough to join you. And then he leaves and he feels bad. It's like, yeah, I agree with what they're saying. Why didn't I join them? But then he goes upstairs where they're keeping the tablet. And then suddenly the students end up sort of rushing the building. They decide, okay, we've got to sort of take over the hall, and they do. And then once they're in there, it's like, oh, what about this tablet? Are we going to try to keep this tablet hostage? And they're like, yeah, I guess we are. It's sort of believable mob mentality, students who aren't exactly sure what they want or what the plan is and sort of just moving as a mass. Peter's like, oh, great, here I am stuck in the middle of all this. He's still inside the building, even though he's not actually with it. And then who should attack but the Kingpin, who decides to take advantage of the situation, which has been on the news. Thankfully, we're not dealing with the newspaper news cycle for once. There's actually TV news, which makes a lot more sense. And he decides to attack in the middle of all this and steal the tablet for himself. Spider-Man has to change, gets in a big fight with the Kingpin. Always, I love watching Spider-Man fight the Kingpin. It is unlike Spider-Man fighting anyone else.
And we have more visual evidence of the Kingpin being super powered here, in that he rips a door completely off its hinges. And it's not just that that's visual shorthand, but one of the characters actually says to the question, who is that? It says, I don't know, but he tore the door off its hinges barehanded. So this seems to be more evidence towards the idea that the Kingpin, through some mechanism, has super strength in some way.
Or he's just a badass dude. He's just extremely strong, maybe on the very edge of superhuman. In the end, the Kingpin gets away with the tablet. Spider-Man can't chase after him because he has to save Randy, who is almost crushed by a falling ceiling. Then all the students get arrested unfairly for everything that has happened. And Kingpin gets away, but Spider-Man is swinging after him. And that's seemingly, we're going to pick up right there where we leave off next issue. I don't remember if we do, but that's what seems to be happening. I think that this is an excellent issue. Obviously hanging over this issue is Ditko's last issue, which I think was issue 38, where Peter runs into student protesters in that issue and dismisses them the way that only a 40-year-old Randian activist could have. And he is just entirely sneering and dismissive towards the whole idea of student protest in that issue, which seemed very out of character. It didn't seem like a coincidence that was Ditko's last issue, and that maybe he wasn't welcome on the book anymore after showing Peter acting seemingly so out of character in that book. That just didn't seem like something Peter would do. But then Stan Lee or John Romita, depending on who you want to give credit for plotting the book, since then has avoided the topic of student protest. And here we have it crashing back with a vengeance. And I think it is well handled in this book. And again, we have Peter not being the sort of person who would carry around a picket sign, but someone who is much more inherently sympathetic to what the students want. And I think this is long overdue and a nice corrective to that final Ditko issue. What do you think, Steve?
Yeah, I thought this is a really good issue. I agree with you about the idea that obviously the student protests about the Vietnam War were the big thing going on, but there was a lot of activism in general on campuses. And this seems like a believable issue here. And, in the end, all the students get arrested because they are considered to be in cahoots with the Kingpin here, which I'm interested to see where that turns up.
Yes.
But yeah, in terms of the value of the tablet and misunderstanding how things work in the world, Pete, when he's walking by the display case for the tablet, does say, if anyone ever deciphers that inscription, he'll have it made for life. And once again, it's like, oh, Pete, you do not understand how academia works. You might understand how science academia works, but not humanities academia. That is not how that works.
I think the idea is that it has this may be true. I think it eventually turns out it's the secret of eternal life is on the tablet or something like that, which would make more sense. But there's no indication here that it's anything that important. All right. So I guess that's it for Spider-Man number 68. Let's go ahead and do, let's go and do Daredevil number 48.
Yes, a towering issue in the history of Marvel Comics.
Well, it is literally a towering issue. We've got a very tall villain.
Yes, I intended the double meaning there.
Okay.
Yes, we have a towering villain and we have a not so towering issue that we've got here. So on the cover, we see that we are fighting the Stiltman, and it's a wordless cover. We just see Daredevil being dropped by the Stiltman down towards the ground. Foggy has been running for DA. Daredevil
for a long time.
Yes. And Daredevil is thinking about the implications of this when he overhears some goons talking about taking out a hit on Foggy Nelson because he's going to be Yes.
You should do the credits.
Oh, I should do the credits. I'm always in such a hurry to go ahead and start getting through Daredevil that I forget to do the credits. A new spectacular swinging saga by Smilin' Stan Lee and Genial Gene Colan, embellished by George Klein, lettered by Artie Simek. So Colin Klein artwork, not bad.
Oh, yeah. Looks great. Looks great, except for just a few panels where it looks shockingly bad, which I generally think of Klein as fixing and things like that. But generally speaking, pretty great.
Yes, and the issue is called Farewell to Foggy. So Daredevil overhears some goons talking about a hit that has been taken out on Foggy because he's going to just really stick it to the organized crime syndicates. So they've got to get rid of him before he's elected.
It's been established that Foggy is running as a right-wing DA, that Foggy is a right-winger running explicitly as a right-wing DA, which I guess is... I guess these. Oh, yeah.
I mean,
well, remember his girlfriend
is anti-corruption, certainly.
No, remember his girlfriend was protesting entirely acceptable issues to be protesting. And he's like, I'm running as a conservative DA. I can't have my girlfriend protesting these entirely reasonable issues.
I'll have to go back and reread that to see if I agree with that or not. But okay, point taken. So Daredevil goes and starts fighting these goons, and he's able to get a little bit more information by listening to them while he's fighting. And so he knows that they were going to try to attack Foggy that evening in his offices. And you talk about some weird art. Page 6, panel 4. Look at Daredevil's eyes in that panel. Mm-hmm. Those are just really strange. They're like way too large. One way or the other, Daredevil, Matt Murdock dressed up more like Mike Murdock, honestly, if you ask me.
What is that ascot?
He's wearing a suit with his shirt unbuttoned to like the second button and a scarf / ascot stuffed into the shirt.
A green plaid ascot with a matching green plaid pocket handkerchief.
Yes. So he is a real swinger here. So he comes in and Karen has returned. Last time we saw Karen had been working at the welfare office. And one thing I neglected to mention when we saw that is that it's interesting that was portrayed as an unalloyed good thing to be doing. I guess that welfare had not yet been pejorativized, whatever, turned into a pejorative yet at that point, at least not fully. Mm-hmm. So Matt kisses her, and it seems like they are getting ready to actually begin a romance when Matt is like, well, I need to get these guys out of here because I know the hit is going to be coming in and I need to wait for them and I need them out of here. So he just acts like a real dick. And well, like he usually does. I mean, this shouldn't be a surprise to anybody.
But Karen says, Matt, you've never acted this way before. Like, this has happened over and over again, Karen, where suddenly he's got to be rude to you for some indirect reason. And you all can't believe he's ever acted like this before. You've said those exact words many times before, Karen.
In fairness, a lot of those times that was actually Mike Murdock. And it's just that we had a hard time keeping track of which one is which. Yes.
But there were times before when like it seemed like Mike Murdock had died and they're like, Matt, I can't believe you're being so callous about your brother's death. And there were things like that. There have been plenty of times before.
Anyway, he drives everybody out of the office and basically drives them out of his life, more or less, and is there when Stiltman does show up for the hit. On page 11, we have a splash page, which I guess is an action-oriented enough splash page to warrant a splash page, but it still just looks kind of weird. It doesn't really look... What do you think about that splash page on page 11?
Well, A, it's weird that Stiltman has no feet. I think that usually Stiltman has feet, and here he does not. B, what is going on with the perspective lines on the desk? I guess that the idea is this is a trapezoidal-shaped desk, but it looks very strange when it's pushed over. Yeah, other than that, it's perfectly okay, perfectly acceptable thing to do a splash page compared to some of Gene Colan's other splashes.
Yes, although still the composition is a little bit weird. The bottom third of the page is pretty empty. There's not really much action going on. Anyway, one way or the other. Yeah, but the lack of a foot on Stiltman there is a little bit odd. But I guess that maybe Gene Colan is thinking, well, his real feet are going to be somewhere in the middle here. And so it wouldn't make sense to make it look like his foot is extending out that far. I don't know. But we see more of that as the story goes on. We do see his footless legs a couple more times. Anyway, they get into a big battle. At one point, Stiltman knocks a hole in the wall, and Daredevil is hanging on to his leg, which is just held out in a way where it's like, ooh, that I don't know how that would work, but okay. But then Stiltman retracts the leg very quickly, leaving Daredevil to fall. He, of course, is able to save himself because of what, Matt?
A flagpole.
A flagpole, of course. How many flagpoles are there actually in New York City? I've never really noticed that many of them, but,
Well, and the crazy thing is, every building has a flagpole. Almost every window in New York City has a flagpole in Marvel Comics, and yet none of them have any flags on them. Never once is there a flag on the flagpole.
This is true. Yes, that's a good point. There are also alleyways everywhere, and we've discussed how that's not a thing. Daredevil and Stiltman fight for a while. Another splash page on page 18. We see another weird shot of the footless leg on page 19, panel 2. Daredevil can't follow Stiltman because Stiltman jumps in through a wall of a perfume company or something like that. And so Daredevil's senses are baffled by the smells of perfume. So anyway, Stiltman gets away, and then we see Foggy Nelson having his victorious election party, and people ask him, because I figured that was implied when I said victorious. But and somebody says, what of your law practice? Will Matt Murdock run your office till you return to private life? And Foggy, with his eyebrow raised and sort of a sneer on his face, looking over towards Matt, says, Murdock can do whatever he pleases. Next question. Then people try to ask Matt about this. He just yells, no comment, and heads out the door. And it says, next, DD drops out. So, after we had such a surprisingly excellent issue of Daredevil previous to this, this is unfortunately a return to form.
Yes.
And yes, there are some other weird art things in this issue other than just the footless leg. So page 13, panel 1. I think we're looking at his butt, but then we're also looking at his full chest all at the same time.
Stiltman is beating up a couch, and he is twisted around completely so that we're looking at the back of the bottom half of him and the front of the top half of him. It's very strange. But that's more of a Cohen problem. In terms of Klein problems, page 9, panel 3, we have Matt there in the office with Foggy and Karen, and panel 3 of page 9 is just extremely sloppy in a way that Cohen can be sloppy, but Klein usually isn't. And I think Klein just was defeated by Cohen here. And it's like, hey, man, if you're going to draw that way, I'm going to ink it that way. And there's a famous incident that we're going to have coming up in a couple of years where I think it was that Bill Everett was inking Ross Andrew, and Ross Andrew was giving him very sketchy pencils. And Bill Everett was expected to sort of fix them every month. And then finally, Bill Everett got fed up with Ross Andrew, and it's like, if you pencil it that way, I'm going to ink it that way. And then inked in every sketchy line. And Marvel was like furious at him. And it's like going, you should see the pencils. All right. I am inking the pencils. But I get the feeling this is Klein getting fed up with Cohen here. I don't know.
Well, I can say that we aren't talking about Guardians of the Galaxy in this particular episode, but I got to say that I think Cohen was not doing his best work this month. I'm guessing that he was a little overdone.
Yeah, I have some affection for the Guardians of the Galaxy, but we'll get to that in probably our next episode.
Yes. So any other thoughts on that before we head on to Thor?
A couple more thoughts. We have a new logo, which I like a lot. Here comes Daredevil, the man without fear. We no longer have Dare and Devil on separate lines, which I didn't like.
I hadn't noticed. You're right. Actually, isn't this the original logo that was before the hyphenated one?
Oh, I guess you're right. This may be the return of the original logo. I'm not sure. I can see you've started to sensitize me to the different types of hatching that Klein does. And not just Klein. I mentioned before, I've been rereading the Archie Goodwin, Al Williamson, Secret Agent X9 comics. Mm-hmm. And in those, Williamson very much uses different types of hatching in the same strip. Now you've totally ruined everything for me. So,
no, Al Williamson can basically do no wrong when it comes to that stuff. If Al Williamson's doing it, it's right.
Okay, good. I'm glad to have that license now. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the next book we are doing, which is Thor.
Yes, I believe so.
I've got it lucky this week. I get to do a lot of great comics, much more so than you. Yes. The Mighty Thor, number 160, and now Galactus. And we've got Thor on the cover with a little inset of Galactus. And it is great that these great characters are getting to go up against each other. I think we just had a little brief thing before where there was just a little cameo of Galactus a little while ago, but he never actually met Thor. In this one, he actually will. So we have the Mighty Thor and now Galactus. So starts a staggering new saga by Stan the Man Lee and Jack King Kirby, embellishment Vince Colletta. So we just had the end of a big storyline here in Thor, and often at the end of a big storyline, they have Thor then go back to his practice and go like, where's everybody? I'm here back trying to resume my doctor practice here on Earth. But they don't do that this issue. He's just flying around Earth, Midgard, I should say. And then he sees a familiar looking spaceship. It's like going, uh-oh, I know that spaceship. And indeed, here is the person I associate with that spaceship, Tana Nile, who was briefly Jane Foster's roommate, even though it was very clear she was an alien. And then she eventually tried to take possession of the Earth in that old storyline, but then was convinced to move back to Rigel. It turns out she was one of the colonizers of Rigel, and she was convinced to move back to Rigel. Thor is worried, what are you doing back here, Tana Nile? And Tana was like, don't worry, I've just come to get you because we have a big problem, and that big problem is Galactus. And we are now being threatened by him in Rigel. Of course, another character from Rigel who's been hanging out in this book occasionally is the Recorder. Turns out he is still in Asgard, where we see, of course, Odin maxing and relaxing on a spectacular throne, unlike any we have ever seen him on before. More of a chaise lounge than a throne, but the most spectacular chaise lounge that has ever been invented. And of course, he has a new helmet we have never seen before. He is hearing from the Recorder, and the Recorder is also going like, I'm also being summoned back to Rigel. There's big danger brewing, and Sif is like, I'll come with. And then Odin is like, no, you can't. Truly terrible Colletta inking on page 5, panel 2. Looks like it was inked by a child, even to the extent of forgetting to draw on the line to separate the Recorder's arm and chest piece. So the poor colorist had to invent that himself. The Recorder then takes off back to Rigel. We see him flying. He gets a big splash page of flying, which looks nice. Tana Nile and Thor, meanwhile, are going to Rigel when suddenly they're attacked by a refugee. Now, I really like the whole refugee storyline here. It is a Taurian, someone from Tar or something like that, who has a really neat look, really bizarre look, and attacks the ship and says, I must have your ship. And Thor fights him for a long time. And then finally the Taurian explains, okay, mercy, mighty one, I meant thee no harm. My world has been shattered, my people gone. I know not what possessed me. 'Twas all the doing of Galactus. And Thor thinks he is more to be pitied than punished. And so then they keep going, and then they run across all of these refugee ships, which are clogging up space. And they're all fleeing from Galactus, either because they've had their planets destroyed by Galactus, or I guess are going to. And then we cut to our second splash, or I guess our third splash of the issue, on page 13, which is just awesome and is in no way ruined by Colletta. It is a beautifully penciled, dare I say, beautifully inked, and especially beautifully colored headshot of Galactus. I just love everything about this page. The pencils, the inks, and the coloring, especially the coloring. What do you think of this page, Steve?
This is a spectacular splash page. The choice of oranges to add to the magenta and the blue in his getup is an interesting choice that I don't hate. And his bright yellow eyes as well really jump out in this thing.
Yeah, I just love it. So then Galactus is, again, making it clear, Galactus bears malice to no living being. I only slay that I may survive. Like all who live, I must have food. I must not starve. Am I to be faulted for the appetite I bear? The big and the small eat what we must. As for Galactus, naught but a world can assuage his gnawing hunger. He is going like, hey, I'm looking for somebody to eat. Hey, there's a tasty looking morsel I have stumbled across. Ego the living planet. This is brilliant of Stan Lee and Jack Kirby to bring together these two massive space goons that we've had in past issues. Ego the Living Planet was a Thor character. Galactus was a Fantastic Four character. But it is inevitable that our planet-eating goon would run up against our giant planet with a face goon. I should say it is a photo collage on page 15 of, I guess, Ego's face is probably drawn from an old Greek statue, I'd imagine.
Well, is this the same photo collage that was used when Ego was first introduced in Fantastic Four? Is this recycled?
No, Ego was not from Fantastic Four. Ego was from Thor.
Oh, was he? Okay.
Yes.
Well, is this recycled from his first appearance?
I
thought it was.
Oh, maybe.
This looks familiar to that. But then meanwhile, I will point out that Galactus's little scout ship that he's taking does just look like a little mini fridge.
You got your mind twisted by dorm life. Now you see many fridges everywhere you look. So then the Recorder is now reunited with Thor and Tananile and the head of the colonizers of Rigel. They're all sitting around wondering what they're going to do about Galactus, although Galactus is sort of taken care of now because we know that Ego can take care of himself, and we know that they're both in for a big battle here. We briefly cut to an alien race called the Wanderers, who will become a part of this storyline as well. Then that's it. Then Ego and Galactus start shooting beams at each other and seemingly destroy the ship that Thor and the Recorder are taking to just sort of, again, be there for this battle. It's like, dude, if I were you, I would get nowhere near this battle. Like, no matter who wins, we win. No matter who loses, we win. And just go ahead and stay away from this battle.
It's like, no matter who wins, we win. No matter who loses, we lose. It's between Galactus and Ego, we're going to both win and lose this one, it seems. Yes. But this issue, you're right, does just seem like it's just setting up all of these pieces for a big new epic storyline. And I'm excited to see where this thing goes.
Yes. This is just a great idea for an issue and very well executed. Shockingly good inks by Coletta, except for a few panels. Like I said, there was that one panel I pointed out that looked like it was inked by a child. But, you know, he makes up for it with his splash page on page 13. Beautifully colored. It is just a shame they're still not crediting the colors on these books. Hopefully they will start that soon. Just a great issue. My notes are great splash on page 11, great splash on page 13, great splash on page 15. Gets a little repetitive. I say at the end, great issue. Vince Scott doesn't ruin it, so art is awesome. Great coloring, great to get colonizers back, and Galactus versus Ego. Love it! Exclamation point. Thor doesn't just need Asgardian stories. So, you know, generally speaking, Thor is a good book when he's on Asgard, and it's not a good book when he's not on Asgard. But this issue proves who needs Asgard? We've got a great storyline without it.
Yes, he can also be great in cosmic storylines.
Yes.
Fighting the Cobra and Mr. Hyde, not so much.
Not so much, unless we pit the Cobra and Mr. Hyde versus Ego the Living Planet. So,
yes, I wonder how that will turn out.
Well, I don't know. I mean, he's got all the powers of a Cobra in that he's bendy and he shoots darts. So I would think that that would be it. But who knows? Okay. Let's go ahead and move on to X-Men. Is that what we're doing next?
Yep. X-Men number 52, which is, you know, as these issues have been lately, is a bit of a mess. And I'm not sure how I'm going to be able to summarize this thing, but I will do my darndest.
So I should say, before we begin, I inspired Jeff, my best friend Jeff, who lives in New York, to read these X-Men books. He's like, oh, I always wanted to read these old X-Men. Also, he listens to this podcast. He's a regular listener. And he's like, I'm going to start listening. And so then he was looking at this X-Men with Eric the Red on the cover. And he's like, all right, I know that there's a lot of super outfits that look like they would belong at a Pride Parade. And he said, but this Eric the Red outfit is especially Pride Parade-esque. And so then this inspired Jeff going like, I don't know, did some other writer come along later and make this canon? And it turns out they did. If you Google Eric the Red, you'll see him on the gay Marvel website as a character who was later established as being gay or bisexual. I was like, wow, Jeff, you have one hell of a good superhero or supervillain. Spoiler, it turns out he's actually a superhero. Gator. You figure that out. Jeff himself is an entirely straight person. He is a happily married man, but he is really good at spotting gay superheroes.
Okay, I'm not quite sure how what you just said makes sense with what we find out about Eric the Red in here, but
yes, I should explain that we're about to find out. Okay, spoiler alert, we're about to find out that Eric the Red is just Scott Summers in disguise. But then later it turns out he was impersonating a real person, and there really is an Eric the Red.
Ah, okay. So X-Men, Twilight of the Mutants, we see in the foreground Eric the Red in his Pride Parade outfit shooting a blast out of his left hand. That's a question that I don't have answered in terms of how that's happening. Hitting what looks like both the X-Men and Magneto in the background while things fall apart. So, the most unusual fighting team of all, the X-Men in Twilight of the Mutants. And we have little insets, little cameos of all of the characters on the left with their names. It says the recipe for this delectable dish: take one well-seasoned editor, Stan Lee, and one half-baked writer, Arnold Drake. Sprinkle liberally with art by Don Heck and Werner Roth. Stir in a generous amount of inking by John Tartaglione. Cover the whole mess with lettering by Sam Rosen. So we've got Don Heck and Werner Roth tag teaming on the art with John Tartaglione inking. So we're in for a good issue.
Yeah, so we just had 2 issues penciled by Steranko, who is one of Marvel's best pencilers, although he wasn't doing his best work on X-Men. But who boy, are we going to miss him now, because it is 2 of Marvel's worst pencilers and one of Marvel's worst inkers are back on this book for a couple of issues. And then we're going to have Barry Smith, but way before he becomes the Barry Smith we know and love. And I think we're going to have Heck and Roth back. And then finally, we're going to get Neil Adams, who is going to be doing great work in about 5 issues.
But too late to save the book at that point.
Yeah, well, I mean, he then puts in a year of great work, but then the book gets canceled. Like, if you look at all these great Neil Adams runs that he had in the 60s and 70s, they always end with the book getting canceled. Like, Neil Adams never had the ability to save any book. And it's like, how on earth did these books get canceled with Neil Adams art in them every month? It's baffling.
Yeah. We start out, Eric the Red is being tackled by Mesmero's goons, what I guess they're called the Demi-Men. We haven't heard them called that in a little while, who look like just sort of generic goons, but theoretically they're all mutants, but we never see them using mutant powers, really. It's a little bit odd. Speaking of mutant powers, Eric the Red is fighting them off with blasts out of his hand. Now, Matt, has that been explained in any way?
No. I mean, so yes, as I mentioned before, it will eventually turn out that this is just Scott Summers in disguise, but he has entirely different abilities than Scott Summers has, or slightly different abilities, in that instead of sending blasts out of his eyes, he is sending them out of his fingertips. Presumably this is all powers inherent in the suit he's wearing, but we'll find out.
Yeah, who knows? Eric the Red is like, I might not be able to defeat your entire army, but I can bring this whole place down around you. So he does so. The place is about to collapse. Mesmero and the Demi-Men run. Somehow Eric the Red is not crushed in all of this, but Polaris comes out to get him. And it's clear that she is still very torn about her loyalties, her loyalty to her newly found father, or so she believes, versus being a good person. But Eric the Red is like, no, I come not to hurt Magneto, but to help. She's like, what? He then makes his way in to be in the inner circle of this mutant hideout. Cyclops then sends out a message to Marvel Girl, says, ready to begin Operation Twilight. Contact the others and rendezvous as planned. Maintain tight security all the way. Good luck, Marvel Girl. And so she then contacts all the rest of them who come gathering.
Well, not Bobby. She contacts Hank and Warren.
Thank you. Yes, Bobby is not involved because he was considered to be compromised because of his feelings for Lorna Dane. I will point out that as Angel is flying towards the rendezvous, he's flying over presumably the Golden Gate Bridge or possibly the Bay Bridge, and speech balloons from a car say, did you see that, Mildred? A guy flying under the bridge with wings yet. And then she says, Herman, how many times have I told you not to drink before driving? Like, oh, so funny. Drinking and driving. So Mesmero is not that happy with Eric the Red coming in and essentially jumping over him in the line of power here among the evil mutants. But he's like, well, but Magneto is my boss, and so I will do what Magneto says. The X-Men, or the three of the X-Men, make it into the hideout. How they make it in, I'm not entirely sure, but they end up running into Eric the Red, and Marvel Girl runs over and hugs him, and it turns out that's because he is actually Cyclops in disguise, and this has all just been an undercover job that he's doing. So they're setting up some kind of a booby trap on the floor, and they're going to set it off when the bad mutants get there. But as it turns out, Iceman shows up, and they don't realize it's him, and they shock him with the booby trap. Now, how Bobby knew where to find them when they are infiltrating a bad guy's hideout, I don't know. But
well, no, he had been to this hideout before. How did he know they would be attacking it at the same time? But they all at this point knew where the hideout was.
I guess you're right. But yeah, how he knew that they were there is the question. Oh, you know what? No, never mind. He didn't think that they were there. He's showing up there to basically tell Lorna Dane some information that he found out. So I guess it's just a coincidence that he showed up at the same time that the rest of them were there. So never mind about that. So at this point, the bad mutants find the X-Men who were there and start fighting them. Marvel Girl is able to hit Mesmero with some of his own medicine. Basically, they're fighting on sort of the same level of mental powers. Iceman is able to get to Lorna Dane and tell her that Magneto is lying to her, that it's like, yes, your parents are not your real parents. That part is true. But you were raised by like your aunt or whatever, and her husband, or uncle and his wife, or something like that. That's who you thought your parents were. So yes, you are adopted, but you are definitely not Magneto's daughter. You just happen to have very similar powers to him. So then she's like,
this whole time we've been reading these comics, I'm like, isn't it revealed in this first storyline that she's not really Magneto's daughter? And yes, it is. I was remembering that correctly. Although I think later, as with so many issues of Magneto parentage, I think this was later retconned to be like, no, she really is his daughter. And then retconned again to go like, no, she really isn't. Just like whether or not Wanda and Pietro or Magneto's kids were being retconned back and forth depending on who had legal rights to which characters at any given time.
Yes, that's a whole other story. So anyway, Lorna turns on Magneto, and the X-Men all escape with Lorna, and they go back to their San Francisco hideout. And it's clear that Bobby and Lorna seem to have a thing going on as Bobby recovers from his injuries that he sustained. Then at the end, it says, "Gather ye rosebuds while ye may, X-Men, for in a short while the cry will ring forth, Cyclops, wanted dead or alive." I guess this plot isn't quite as opaque as some of the other ones of late have been, but it's still, this is not Marvel's best book. Let me just put it that way.
Oh, God.
I don't know if it's Marvel's worst book or not, but it's certainly not their best.
Oh, that's right. So they established, I couldn't remember if they had established that Polaris wasn't really Magneto's daughter in this issue. And it turns out they do establish that. I also hadn't remembered if they established that this Magneto in these issues is actually a robot, which they had not established. But that will be established, I think, early in the Adams issues, that this entire storyline, Magneto has had nothing to do with it and has been completely unaware of it. And they have been working with a Magneto robot this whole time, which is odd. I don't know why they did that. I think it's just maybe when Roy Thomas was back on the book, he's like, that was a very underwhelming Magneto storyline in which he was acting somewhat out of character and really was entirely tangential to what was going on in the book. He's barely in this issue, despite being on the cover. And I guess that they went ahead and Roy Thomas was like, nope, that was a robot, in the grand tradition of Marvel writers coming in to books and going like, I thought that character was out of character, therefore I will retroactively declare them to be a robot, which happened several times in the 80s when we were reading comics.
Okay. Anyway, we can move on to the final book of this episode.
Well, no, we still need to do the backstory in X-Men. Yeah, I'll go and wrap up the front story going like, I say in my notes, Steranko already missed on the cover and very much missed on the inside. It has all of Marvel's worst except for Kaleida on this book. It said, it's good to get the storyline wrapped up, but it's a shame that terrible artists came back to do it. Art looks terrible. Okay, story is. But I'm glad that we wrapped everything up. And I feel like we wrapped everything up fairly satisfactorily. I'm glad that players turned out not to be Magneto's daughter. And I think Eric the Red has certainly an interesting look. I think it's somewhat interesting that he turns out to be Scott in disguise, although you're right, they never explain why he has different powers. And I think it's sort of fun that he comes back later and it turns out that they managed to get more juice out of this character.
So then we move on to the origins of the Uncanny X-Men, the crimes of the Conquistador, produced by El Magnifico Lee, written by El Prolifico Drake, drawn by El Terrifico Roth, inked by El Gigantico Verpurten, lettered by Hieroglyphico Rosen. All right, I'll grant them that. That's fun. El Conquistador has the Beast captured and is telling him, you're going to go and steal this miniature nuclear reactor that can power my weaponry more in a more mobile fashion. And the Beast is like, I'm clearly not going to be doing that. You can't make me do that. And he says, oh yeah, I've got your parents tied up in the next room. And he's like, oh, I guess I will be doing that. Okay. So
one of the problems with not having a secret identity is they have established that the Beast has always been pretty open about his powers and who he is. And this is always a problem when you don't have a secret identity and that people can tie up your parents and make you do stuff.
Yes. At the X Mansion, we've got Cyclops, Iceman, and Angel. Angel, we have not actually seen his origin story yet, but he has already appeared here. So Cyclops says, shh, the professor is getting some sort of cerebral signal. It may be the boy Hank McCoy. Professor X says it is, but it's quite feeble. The lad is in trouble, all right. Something to do with his parents. But he basically can't get a strong enough signal. So then he goes into the first iteration of Cerebro. Although I think we had seen earlier iterations of Cerebro in the book, and it doesn't matter one way or the other. This is an early version of it that is helping him with this. We then see Hank break into the building where this power supply is stored. He grabs it and sets off an alarm. He then is able to escape with it, despite the alarm having gone off and the guards trying to stop him. He then gets back to El Conquistador and gives him the thing, and he says, could you cool your rapturous maunderings long enough to release my parents as mutually agreed? At which point El Conquistador backhands him, says, shut your mouth, boy. Your parents will remain where they are indefinitely as permanent hostages against your rebellious spirit until you are of no further use to me. Beast is in a bit of a pickle here, but presumably he is going to be rescued from this conundrum by the rest of the soon-to-be X-Men.
But as I point out in my notes, they seem to be in no hurry to do so. they're like, really, we have to rescue this person. Should we rescue him before he steals a nuclear reactor for the villain? And they're like, no, I don't think we'll be doing that.
Right. John Verporten does elevate this little segment a little bit, but there's only so much he can do.
Yeah, it's nice to have Verporten back. I think he was missing from the last issue, and he is good inker on Roth, makes it much better looking than the front half of the book was, inked by Tartaglione. And this is a perfectly fine story. It's classic. Hero has his parents tied up, is forced to steal a nuclear reactor, yada, yada, yada. It's a tale
as old as time.
Yes.
The parents tied up and you have to steal a nuclear reactor. All right.
We've all been there.
Yeah. Who hasn't?
All right, so let's go ahead and finish up January 1969 with Incredible Hulk number 111, Shanghaied in Space. Who was it? One of my kids, we were watching something that used the word Shanghaied, and they're like, what does that mean? And we had to explain that Shanghaied means you're basically being kidnapped, often to being forced to work for somebody. And indeed, that is what happens in here, presumably because people used to be kidnapped to the Chinese city of Shanghai and forced to do something.
Or I thought it was like people were kidnapped in the Chinese city of Shanghai to work in various marine jobs anyway, something like that.
I don't know.
One way or the other. It's a term that's probably not a term we should use. I don't know.
Yeah.
But who knows? I probably still use it from time to time myself, but probably shouldn't.
I'm not sure if you visit the town of Shanghai in 2026, they would go like, Shanghai, moan to you from the term Shanghai. Come experience the original.
Yes. And I'm sure they would appreciate being called a town.
Yes. Oh, all those little Chinese towns. Shanghai, places like that. So then we have Shanghai in space. Story and art, Smilin' Stanley and Happy Herbie Trimpy. Usually when Stanley leaves a book, he doesn't come back to it, but Stanley has returned with a vengeance to the Hulk. Embellishment, Dandy Dan Atkins. Lettering, Swinging Sammy Rosen. Uh-oh. So, and you could tell this right away with the cover, that this book has been looking absolutely gorgeous for the last couple months, because we had Herb Trimpe on penciling and John Severin on inking. John Severin obviously can make anybody look great, but he was especially making Trimpe look great because Trimpe has an extreme dynamism, which was being completely sort of almost reversed by Severin's finely etched ornate inking. And you would think that would be a disaster, and instead it was gorgeous. And this issue, we have one of Marvel's other best inkers, Dan Atkins, but I think he is not bringing what Severin brought to this book. And I'm not a big fan of the cover, which shows the Hulk leaping up and fighting a bunch of spaceships in outer space. And I'm not as much of a fan of the inside as I have been of the last couple of issues. How do you feel about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's obviously a very different look. John Severin is really doing finishes more than inks when he's doing this work. But, Dan Atkins does a decent job here.
Dan Atkins is a great inker. And, the inks themselves in this issue look good. They're just not improving the penciling as much as Severin was.
Sure.
Last issue, the Hulk destroyed a planet destroyer that was Umbu the Unliving, which was a giant walking statue in the Savage Land that was connected to a machine that was destroying the Earth, and the Hulk destroyed it. And now it turns out that the distant alien race that created Umbu the Unliving is not happy about this. They had some sort of alert on their phone that was set to go off whenever one of their distant statues was destroyed. And now they're coming to Earth to sort of deal with this. I kind of like their ship. I like the Trimpe tech here of what their ship looks like. This race and their ship and their Galaxy Master will eventually return for a Bill Mantlo storyline many years later. I've mentioned many times on this podcast that Bill Mantlo is my favorite Hulk writer. And I read these issues. I'm like, ooh, hey, here's the beginning of that storyline. When last we saw, Bruce Banner was dead in the Savage Land. Kazar, of course, has to go off and do whatever jungle heroes often do. He has to go off and get special herbs and plants to restore Bruce Banner to life. But he doesn't get a chance because as soon as he's gone, aliens land. Now, how can aliens land in the Savage Land, which is underground, as far as we can tell? That's very unclear. And indeed, Kazar is like, oh, let me figure out where the aliens came from. Kazar then comes back, sees the little indention of Bruce Banner on the ground, realizes that he's been dragged away, sees alien footprints leading away from it. And then he, much more explicitly than we usually see, we see him climbing out the hole that leads to the surface, making it very clear that they were underground and that possibly the Earth has an internal sun.
Well, you could interpret this as that's a high mountain wall that he's climbing over, and he's going to get out of the microclimate of the Savage Land into greater Antarctica.
But he explicitly says the prints lead upward toward the outside world, implying that they are inside.
Perhaps.
Yeah. He emerges into the outside world, which is the frigid wastes of Antarctica, and it's like, okay, he is just gone. So presumably these aliens somehow landed inside the Earth and kidnapped Bruce Banner, took him back out into outer space, noticed that he's dead, but they're like, that's no problem. We'll put him in the resuscitator so that we can get our revenge on him and kill him all over again. So then...
Well, I think that they're saying that they are essentially in thrall to this thing called the Galaxy Master, and the Galaxy Master requires the one who destroyed the planet-destroying machine to be brought to him, and if they can't bring him the one who destroyed the machine, then they will be destroyed.
Yes. So then we briefly check in with Talbot and Ross, and then Talbot visits Betty Ross, who is in a wheelchair. She's in a wheelchair and she has crutches. So that's double help getting around. I don't remember when she got that injured. Do you remember this?
Wasn't there something in a car? I'm not
sure.
I
guess. That was a long time ago, but I guess I need to be keeping better track of this.
Honestly, when I read through this, I just totally didn't clock that she was in a wheelchair. I just read right past this little segment. And
Yes.
I'm like, yeah, wow, that is a little bit odd.
A wheelchair with crutches leaning up against it. She, of course, is still in love with Dr. Banner, and no one can understand this. Oh, I guess, I'm sorry. This is, at first I said this was Glenn Talbot she's with. No, this is Rick she's with. You can tell because he doesn't have the little mustache.
Right.
We cut back to Bruce Banner, who wakes up on the ship. He has been successfully resuscitated. And what is this? His entire life is going to flash before him. And we get his entire life flashing before him on page 9, which is odd. It's a big wrapped present. It's some strap-on roller skates. It's a toy plane. I guess this is all stuff from his childhood.
It's an old Victorian granny.
Yes, and an American flag. Beaker, of course, later we'll find out that there's a whole epic story of Bruce Banner's abusive childhood, but that has not been revealed yet.
When does that happen? I know I've heard of that before, but do you have an idea
about
when?
That was final issue in issue 313.
Ah, okay.
And the next regular writer on the book, the next long-term writer on the book, Peter David, took it and ran with it. We're back out in outer space. These aliens are going to check in with the Galaxy Master, and the Galaxy Master says, "Your prisoner has thwarted my plans, thus he must perish."
Oh, one thing that I don't think you specified is that when his life flashes before his eyes, essentially the Hulk does not show up in this. So the Sagittarians, the name of this race, are completely unaware of anything that has to do with the Hulk at this point. Because that's just edited out of the memories that they're able to retrieve.
Yes, it says, while in its normal state, Bruce Banner's brain contains no evidence of his Hulk identity. They're like, well, this is just a normal scientist. He possesses no superpower. He cannot harm us. So let's just put him out into space. They check in with the Galaxy Master, and the Galaxy Master confirms they must perish. The Galaxy Master is essentially gigantic glowing mouth in outer space, or sort of one-celled organism / mouth / something floating out in outer space, sending out rays of power in all directions. So then they put him in a airlock to shoot him out in space. But first he goes in, becomes the Hulk, breaks out of the airlock voluntarily before they can shoot him out of it. You've got a really sort of bizarre sequence here. Again, I think Adkins is not rescuing Trimpe to the degree that Severin might have, in terms of the Hulk is out in space, but he's managing to stay affixed to this ship, which it's very unclear how he is affixing himself. And he is fighting lasers, which it's like, it's unclear how he can exactly fight lasers. And then they start flying around in little, pretty cool looking one-man spacecraft. And
yeah, I love those little spherical one-person spacecrafts. Those are awesome.
Yeah, they're pretty cool. And then he's got to fight those, which again, he wouldn't really be able to fight. He's sort of ripping off parts of the ship and throwing them at the single bubble spacecrafts. Then he manages to completely destroy the ship. The ship crashes to the planet, and he survives that just fine. You would think that that might do some damage to you, but he just gently leaps off the crash as it crashes and says, Hulk is back on the ground. Like, yeah. And apparently none the worse for wear. But then the Hulk looks up and sees the giant mouth in the sky and says, I, the Galaxy Master, the only living entity against whom all your strength cannot prevail, the Supreme Space Lord who shall now destroy you. And of course, we end with the 3 words that we so often do.
To be Hulk-inued.
I think it is just a damn shame to lose John Severin. I think that Dan Atkins is a great inker, but is not counteracting Herb Trimpe's not so good instincts as well as Severin does. I think that the storytelling is a little weak and unclear, but I guess Lee is really, to the degree that Lee is plotting the book, is really the most to blame for this issue, because like putting the Hulk in outer space is not the best place to put the Hulk. And the whole action scene in outer space really doesn't make any sense. And really the whole plot doesn't really make much sense in terms of why they kidnap him, why they then decide to kill him, what on earth this giant floating mouth is, what it wants, and how it intends to fight the Hulk, how the Hulk intends to fight it. It's all a little bit unclear. But other than that, the issue is fine. What do you think of this issue, Steve?
Yeah, I think that the adventures out in space here don't bother me as much as they bother you. I mean, why they don't bother me as much, I couldn't necessarily say. I definitely see what your point is here with that, but for some reason, I'm willing to give it a pass.
Okay.
But yeah, I love the splash page on page 14 with the little spherical vehicles exiting the mothership in a big line coming out towards us. The Trimpe tech there is quite nice.
Yeah, lots of good trippy tech in this issue. We really haven't seen him get to do a lot of outer space action yet, and it turns out he's good at it.
Yes, indeed. So yeah, I found this was a serviceable enough issue of Hulk, a fair amount of fun, and I'm excited to see where we go with this stuff. And I don't know whether they mentioned the name of this race here, but yeah, I did look it up, and they're called the Sagittarians.
Yes. Okay, let me look at my notes.
I have no notes for this issue.
No notes.
No notes.
Yeah, I point out the Big Mouth will return in the Menlo issues, but he's not an ideal villain because it's very hard to jump up and punch a giant mouth in the sky. And the Hulk sort of needs punching. That's sort of the bare minimum of Hulk villains, is they have to be punchable in some way. And this is not a very punchable villain. I say Atkins is a great anchor, but Trimpe really needs Severin's attention to detail to counteract his somewhat sloppy tendencies. Art is nowhere near as good. I point out that when Kazar and Bruce Banner are there, that neither of them have eyes for some reason. They just sort of have black smudges for eyes on page 3.
Mm-hmm.
I guess maybe because they don't want to show the dead, lifeless eyes of Bruce Banner. But why can't we see Kazar's eyes? Like, there's a close-up of Kazar on page 4 in which you cannot see his eyes. Why is that the case?
Yeah, I did notice that on the Kazar one there. Yeah, the Bruce Banner one kind of makes sense. But yeah, why you just get a dark shadow area for his eye, for Kazar's eyes, I don't know.
For that matter, it's true of the Sagittarian on page 1 and page 2. And generally speaking, maybe Severin was the guy in the last couple issues going like, no, Herb, you need to draw eyes. I'm going to go ahead and add them in for you. We don't know. But other than that, it's fine. I like the Hulk. I'm always a Hulk fan. And, getting to see the origin of some later storylines I later read is always fun.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess that's it for this episode. That wraps up the first 5 books we're doing from January 1969. I think that this was some good books, and I enjoyed reading them with you, except for the art in X-Men and the writing in Daredevil. But other than that, these were some pretty good books.
Yeah. I guess that's it. Any final word you have before we sign off here?
Nope. I think that's it.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody, for being here. As always, I prefer not just speaking into the void, so having you here is always great. Please like and subscribe and all that sort of stuff that everybody always says and just becomes white noise after a while. But we would very much appreciate any sorts of reviews or ratings, telling anybody about this show who you think might enjoy it, all that sort of stuff. And we've got a Patreon. So engaging with any of those things there would be greatly appreciated.
Yep.
All right. Thank you very much. I will say goodbye and take care. Stay safe out there.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed it, we now have a Patreon where you can show your appreciation. If you've got a few bucks, head over to patreon.marvelrereadclub.com to support us. Also, you can still rate and review us at your podcatcher of choice, and that would be greatly appreciated as well. You can find us online at marvelrereadclub.com, as well as Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads. See you next time.